everybody. My dad thinks his podcast is amazing, so please subscribe, give it 5 stars or whatever, and maybe he'll finally stop talking about it. Anyways, welcome to Sober As.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Sober As Fuck. I'm Jess, this is Ryan, and before we get started, throw out a trigger warning, get the dark stuff out of the way. So we pretty much talk about everything on this podcast, from substance abuse, mental health, self-harm, eating disorders, grief, death, all of the things. So if you're listening and you start feeling a certain way or getting triggered, by all means, prioritize your mental health. But assuming that you stay and listen, then we would love it if you would like, comment, subscribe, and share. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also find us on Instagram. And we have some other things in the works that we will be rolling coming soon to be determined. The only thing I will say is that if I don't kill Ryan before we get it out, then we'll both be back. But in all seriousness, it's fun stuff.
Good shit.
I'm going to take credit and say that I've been working really, really hard on it. No pressure,
Full-time
but
job.
you guys better fucking love
That's
it,
right.
okay?
They will, I'm sure.
Kidding. No, we've both been working on it. We're really excited.
Yes,
so
it's going to be awesome.
We have a fellow Jessica today.
We do. The other Jessica in my life.
We are really amazing people. I just have to say.
And I've got to say that looking back, because you've said that before, looking back to like middle school, high school, stuff like that, any Jessica I've known has always been a very good friend of mine. That's no bullshit. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And I married one. Go figure.
Were all your girlfriends' names Jessica?
No.
That would be smart, though.
It would be, because then you'd never fuck up. You just yell.
We're not giving advice on anything, though.
Anyway, today's guest is a good friend of mine. We actually met in Texas, which was really cool. And we went on a wild ride.
And where am I from?
Texas. See, there we go. We went on a wild ride around the Dallas airport, which I'm sure the other Jessica will talk about.
It's going to get confusing.
I think it'll be fun. Anyway, let's welcome my good friend, Jessica Heckel. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing good. It's good. Hopefully this won't get confusing with two Jessicas on here. So
you're the star of the show today. You are the Jessica. I'm just going to sit here and make people laugh and talk too much.
You are right, though. Jessicas are amazing. So
we are,
yes.
Especially those from Texas.
Yeah, what's up with that? So weird.
We're in Texas.
So I grew up in a very tiny town in East Texas called Nacogdoches, Texas. Stephen F. Austin College. Yeah, that's where I grew up. That's where my roots are. We're actually going to travel down there this summer.
Yep, in June.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of June.
Yeah, my brother still lives in Dallas, so we try to go down there at least once or twice a year to visit.
Okay. Very nice.
Well, you've surpassed 500 days, which I'm so proud of you for. It's been kind of nice. I've actually seen your whole journey, which is really cool. And then you and I have become very good friends. What have you, before we get into the before, what has been the biggest thing you've noticed over these, over 500 days in your sobriety? What have you noticed, like, big change-wise in yourself?
That's a great question. I would say that the clarity that I have has been astonishing in many ways. And I would say that a lot of what I consider to be my alcohol-free journey has also been kind of a healing journey and even kind of a spiritual awakening, really. And that was very unexpected to me, but has been very powerful in terms of how I think about life and just how I operate now.
That's awesome.
That's good.
I feel like even people, like, regardless where you fall on, like, spiritual, religious, whatever you want to call it, there's this some sort of, like, awakening that everybody has across the board. And that's something, we've talked previously about AA in the big book, and, that's sort of like a root, whether that's something that people utilize or not, there's always some good nuggets in there. And that whole higher power, whether it be your own personal self or whatever, I hear that consistently, even from people who've been like very staunchly atheist or not spiritual. I think it's human nature to feel some sort of force or pull. Um, like, was that something like that you noticed before when you were drinking, or was it something that you really connected with once you got sober?
It was something I connected with once I got sober. I think the pandemic maybe shifted things a little bit in terms of just trying to, I had moved to Arizona in toward the end of 2018. And so when the pandemic hit, I was living in this tiny little studio. I was completely isolated. I never worked from home. And I didn't think I would survive mentally if I didn't figure out a way to get through it. And so I think that was maybe like a tiny glimpse of it. But then really the alcohol free journey is what started it, because most of my adult life, I definitely wasn't religious, and I didn't consider myself to be spiritual either, because I saw them as being the same for so long. And so and I think that part of it was why I drank too, because it felt like, what is the purpose of life? When you go through all these difficult things or traumatic things, or things feel kind of meaningless and random and chaotic, like, it's like, why not drink?
Right.
Like, it might make me feel a little better.
Yeah.
The why behind it. Yeah.
And, speaking of, the spiritual side of it, you are very big into meditation. If you want to speak on that and some of the things that you've done, places you've gone, because I think that's just so cool and incredible.
Yeah, meditation is a really important part of my life now. And every single day, there are only two things that I tell myself that I have to do. And it's meditate and don't drink. And so I've been keeping track of different habits in an app. And so I just hit the 1,000 day in a row of meditation.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
During the pandemic, and I do transcendental meditation, but I learned through Calm, and I've had the Headspace app, and I've done Joe Dispenza's meditations. I actually did a silent meditation retreat in November for 5 days, which was really cool. So it's become a really important part of my life.
That's awesome. A lot of people struggle with meditation because they think that it's like fighting against their mind to be quiet, and it's really the opposite. I don't have to tell you this. So what inspired you to start meditating, other than was it just something that you saw when you started working a program, and what really connected with you, because that seems to be your thing?
That's a great question. So I went to a conference when I lived in Scottsdale that was related to the industry that I'm in. I'm in wealth management, and there was an author there that I happened to meet, and I got it's kind of a random story, but it's interesting how sometimes these things can change the course of your life, because it was February 2020, and so he signed his book and gave it to me, and I read it when everything shut down, and he started this Zoom group basically. So to me, it was almost like Reframe 1.0. And so he would bring on people at some point, but he talked about what was influential to him. And so I kept hearing about meditation, and specifically transcendental meditation. So people like Oprah or Ray Dalio, and he did it. And so sometimes I think a maybe guidepost for me is if I hear something 2 or 3 times from different people, that I'm like, that's something I think I need to look into, or I think that's leading me somewhere. And I just kind of follow that path and see where it takes me.
That's awesome.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I love that. It's almost like following your gut. People always say things like your body will tell you stuff, or pay attention to the repeating patterns. And it's so true. If something continues, and we're not just talking about like social media algorithm stuff, like things like in multiple different arenas in your life continue to pop up, I think that a lot of people push that away, and that's really what stops them or prevents them from moving on to that next step or leveling up. I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can go the opposite way too,
Sure.
because last year, even being alcohol free, my intuition was telling me something about a guy and was like, this guy's a bad dude. And I totally ignored it. And then I had to pay the price. And it's just like one of those things like, okay, like I get it.
Right.
Like,
But once you start listening to that and you recognize it, everything changes. You know, like you're like, oh, I actually should listen to the thing that my brain and my body are telling me. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
yeah. And if I could just add too, I think alcohol disconnects us from that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just so disconnected on so many levels because of alcohol. And then when you take that away, it's so much easier to tune in. It's not always easy, but it's easier. And then you just start doing it and it becomes more natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of compare it to, with my mental health and my ADHD, quitting drinking is like the equivalent of seeing a good therapist or being on the proper medication or working the right program, like whatever it is. It's not that, well, first of all, you don't need to be fixed because you're not broken, right?
Yeah.
But it just turns the noise, like the white noise in the background, down a little bit so you can see and process things more clearly.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Well, so let's go back now about over 500 days to when you actually made the decision that alcohol was no longer going to be a part of your life. So what was it that kind of transformed or changed your relationship with alcohol at that time?
Sure. That's a great question. I'll just start by saying that when I really started drinking, it was when I went to college, and I basically drank my entire adult life. And it was incredibly destructive at the beginning. And then I sort of slowed down over time, but it was always complicated at best. And in July 2023, I was on Instagram and I saw an ad for Reframe and I got curious and I started doing the daily tasks and I was like, holy shit, this is really bad for you. I just, obviously no one thinks alcohol is good for you, but I had no
Right.
idea how bad it was. So I thought, okay, I'm going to quit. And it was very naive of me because I didn't really build the tools. And so I'd go maybe 30, 45 days and then something would happen. And then, I would have a drink or two. And then I got to the point where I thought, oh, well, I'm only having a drink or two. I don't have a problem anymore. And I got very complacent. And so then in mid-November 2023, I went on a work trip to New York, and it was a bunch of Houston advisors, and I was speaking in a session one day. And so I had cut back on drinking significantly because my job is so demanding. But the second night we were there, we went to a really nice steakhouse, and I thought, okay, I'll have a little bit of red wine with the steak. And then they're like, let's go to a rooftop bar and just have one drink. And so I'm like, okay. And like, just one drink, that sounds fine. And I just remember being in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror, thinking, I feel amazing. And I'm just like, I'm going to worry about it tomorrow. And I stayed out super late. And the next morning was a total disaster because I had a hard time waking up. I showed up late. My face is broken out. I left things behind at the hotel. I missed breakfast. I needed water and coffee. Like, it was just a disaster. And I remember feeling that sense of shame, of just kind of like, why did I do this? That I've felt so many times before. But it gets worse because I thought, okay, I just need to get through the first part of the day and I'm free. And so I got through the first part of the day and I go to where my coworkers are because I'm going to hang out with them. And I'm talking to one of my newer coworkers, and my boss's boss, who they say is never on the floor, he makes a beeline toward us and he's like, it's an emergency. I need someone in this meeting right now. And my coworker was newer. So I had just gotten a promotion. I had to think in my head, what is a bigger risk? Saying no because I'm too hungover, or saying yes and then fucking it up. And so I took the risk of being in that meeting. But I was so hungover, and it was such a, it was a very technical meeting. And I remember going in that meeting, and I didn't know who the client was initially, but then after I looked this person up, they were one of the wealthiest people in the entire world. And I was like, holy shit, like, there is absolutely no way that this is a coincidence. And I could just feel the messages. There were two messages from this whole situation. The first was, if you do this again, it's going to end up worse for you, because I made it through the meeting and I ended up being okay, but I could have ruined my career that I've worked so hard for. And the other thing was, like, look at your potential. Like, I just thought of myself as like this, compared to my coworkers, like, oh, this little girl in Texas who went to public school. And, my coworkers were, a lot of them were in New York, or maybe went to Ivy Leagues or whatever. And so I think that I had just maybe been underestimating myself.
Yeah, you got a big slap of reality, which that happens for anybody, right? It's funny, we were talking about this just the other day, because, a lot of people who manage is not the right word, but they think they're managing, right? They're like, I go to work every day and I excel at my job. I've gotten promotions. I have a nice home. Like, I've never been arrested. I haven't put anyone in my family in jeopardy. Like, you convince yourself that because none of the worst case scenarios have happened, that, oh, you're okay. But inevitably, it always bleeds out into other areas of your life. Like, even if you think that you have it handled, because you're right, like, how well can you really, truly perform if you are dampening yourself so much and you're so hungover? Because I'm sure in that meeting, even though it went great for you, it could have even been better, right? Like, that's what that message was, imagine this opportunity, and there won't be any more if you continue down this path. You're right, all of that hard work and everything that you've put in will be gone. That's pretty strong. I mean, that's, in my head, I'm playing it out like a movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, it just is snowballing,
It's almost like that fork in the road, where you realize, you've got to make a choice kind of deal. And obviously you chose, to me, the better path, not to drink again. Mm-hmm. So that was just your hard stop right there. And then from then on, what did you do? Just kind of dive into the app more and the meetings?
So I had surgery at the end of November in 2023. So in some ways that helped, where it's like forced sobriety, because I couldn't affect my recovery, my physical recovery. But I also had to really reassess. And actually, that author that I mentioned at the beginning of this, or toward the beginning, I actually had a conversation with him, and he was like, you can't drink anymore. And the way he said it was just kind of like, I can't believe you even think that could be a question. Mm-hmm. And so I think I knew deep down that I couldn't drink anymore, but I also, to have someone else tell me, and that it wasn't even stern the way that he said it, but it almost felt stern. So I did start to attend a lot of meetings and really just work on all of the tools. And one thing that helped with my meditation practice or my spiritual journey was I started looking for things to do that didn't involve drinking. And I found a meditation center. Mm-hmm. It was just a coincidence, but that became a big part of my journey too. And a lot of those people are, let's call it, naturally sober. It's just, And I've been on retreats where you have to sign something saying that you're not going to smoke or drink or whatever else. And so it's nice to be in those types of environments and not even have to worry.
Yeah. I have a question going back to like corporate world. So you've been in corporate world, Ryan, for many, 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 many years.
Yep.
How have you, like, what sort of have you noticed being in that corporate environment? Because it seems like alcohol, as far as like events and outings, and, there's that whole like, let's go get a drink after a work thing. And that's where a lot of networking happens. How have you, I mean, I know that it's not an issue now, but how did you see yourself sort of like navigating that? Because I don't think people realize, unless they are working these programs, like having a drink with certain people when you're at work sometimes is what can boost your career to the next level, like ironically enough. So how have you sort of navigated that part of it?
That's such a great question. And I remember a lot of my 20s, I went to happy hours. I went to Friday happy hours that turned into late nights, or we'd even sometimes drink during. And this was not in the investment management part of my career, but I did have a corporate career where people would go and drink at lunch, and that was how we'd have fun. And even now, there's happy hours, and it's very normalized. And I do feel like sometimes I'm already at a disadvantage because it's so male dominated, and there're just going to be spaces where it's just awkward for me to be doing something one-on-one, whereas my male coworker, he can go golfing and he can go do all these things. And so even when alcohol's not involved, I would say, if I think there's a good reason why I should be at something where there's alcohol, it's not difficult to get, sparkling water and lime, or even maybe get a mocktail or something like that. And then just be totally comfortable with my decision. I think if I'm cool with it, then most people are cool with it. It's only the people that are very uncomfortable with their relationship with alcohol that would say something. But typically, I don't even think people notice. It's just more, I just don't like being in those types of environments as much as I used to.
Yeah,
I think you're right, because I noticed when I would get in those situations, I noticed no one really looked at me or said anything when you're confident. So if you're confident in your decision, you just say, hey, I'm going to, do this. It seems to be when you're not confident about it, it's when somebody's like, oh, so you're, that's when the questions come out. When you're confident about it and just kind of stern and steadfast, I think it's kind of a non-issue, really.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And if you put sparkling water and lime in a glass, you can't even tell them.
Nobody's the wiser anyway, unless they heard you, order it or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, they're like watching, like, man, you have a tolerance.
That's right.
You're like, oh, okay.
I've been through like 10 of those tonight. Jesus Christ.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I am one of the boys, That's hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm with you too. If I feel like a situation, I'm just one of those that really doesn't enjoy going out anymore. Now, if it's something I have to be at, have to attend, I don't mind doing it. But I just have an NA option, and I get out of there as soon as people try to take it too far. I know it's or it starts getting loud. Time for me to go. It's my bedtime. I got to go.
I will say too, I think that the advantage is sobriety and not drinking has sort of become a big thing for people. Like, I see a lot of people like choosing to not drink who would not consider themselves someone who has an issue with alcohol. Like, sobriety is becoming more and more prevalent. So that's always a good thing too. To go back to what you said before, I mean, people are just really starting to realize how bad it is for your body, Like, we've known that about cigarettes, for example. And so, we were all the the kids who like
Had to be a rabbit.
have a cigarette whenever we're drinking. You know what I mean? Like, and if you say you're not, like you're lying. Like we've all been there. But now, I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation. I'm not having a cigarette, and I think a lot of people, at least ones that I've talked to who are informed about the dangers of alcohol, are the same way, because we realize we've talked about this, like as soon as you take that first sip of alcohol, you like feel it in your bones and you convince yourself like, I feel it, and it's like, no, that's poison. It's like poison, it that feeling is,
well, when you drink too much you throw up.
That's pain. That doesn't feel good. And like the label, the warnings that they're putting on alcohol now, I think is really great. It doesn't stop people, but it's just a little speed bump there to be like, hey, just like a little reminder. And we've seen that there are a lot of NA options. I don't know if
it's growing more and more.
It is. Time. I don't know if you're one like that enjoys mocktails or NA beers or anything like that. I know the people are divided on it. But I definitely think that it is encouraging people like, hey, you can still enjoy like the social aspects that alcohol brings. Kind of like food. It's the same thing without actually having the alcohol.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing that we've missed is like, we don't want to go to a bar. We don't want to go somewhere where there's a lot of alcohol, but the whole like craft brewery or like restaurant and like enjoying and eating and, camaraderie and friendship and community. I think that's why Reframe is so great too, because you're able to have all those things without the alcohol.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's so amazing how many options there are and how it is becoming more normalized, like you said. Actually, now that I'm thinking, I remember the last time I went out with coworkers was in October, and somehow I was sort of part of the group convincing people to go out and do karaoke. And almost everyone drank except me and one other person, but I had so much fun. It was such a blast. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like now I'm at the point where the things that I loved to do when I was drinking, or I thought were more fun when I was drinking, I can do totally sober and have just as much or more fun. Like dancing in public. Like I can, I mean, I look ridiculous, but it's all about having fun. And
doesn't everybody?
It's almost like all of a sudden you have informed consent within yourself. You know what I mean? Because alcohol really does take over. So you do all these ridiculous things and it's embarrassing. But when you're sober and you're doing ridiculous things, you're like, I know I look ridiculous and I don't care because I'm just having fun. It's completely different. Yeah, I think that's
and to
great.
me the biggest thing I've noticed to where I know I'm having a lot more fun is the people watching part of it. Because watching the idiots do the stuff that I used to do, number one, I feel a little bit bad because I'm like, oh my God, sometimes I've turned to Jess and say, did I look like that?
I'm
or
like,
did I do
worse.
that shit?
I'm like, worse, way worse, way worse.
And then we sit and chuckle about it. And sometimes I feel a little bit embarrassed, but I mean, it is what it is. It's happened. I can't change it. But now that I get to, have fun with it and enjoy it, it's like another little piece that I didn't have before because I was the dumbass doing that shit. Now I get to laugh at the person doing it. So it's quite funny.
Well, and you exist in that space where you really are having fun. Like that's the tricky thing about alcohol is, there's that little tiny little like bubble of space when you're drinking where you are you legitimately think you're having fun, and then instantly it turns terrible. So I think a lot of people don't realize is being sober and having fun is like existing in that little bubble space naturally, and it's like natural dopamine and serotonin, except you get to stay there all night long. And then you get to have full control over everything you do. And then the next day you get to remember all of it and feel awesome. Like that's the great thing is you're like, oh my gosh, I went out and had a great time and I'm going to get a full night's sleep and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and feel amazing and not hungover.
And ready to go to a meeting if somebody yanks me into it.
Yes. Yeah. Waking up in the morning being not hungover is, I do not miss hangovers. So That's definitely one of my favorite parts too.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, I think the times now, if I do go out and I'm not drinking, obviously, it's like a more constant energy I feel like I have. Whereas I remember sometimes I would go to a concert and I'd knock back a bunch of White Claws or something. And then it's like all of a sudden I'd hit a wall and I can't stop yawning and I just need to go to bed. Versus it's like, I don't have that kind of crash. And so I can stay up and just power.
You're just more mindful of where you're
yeah.
putting your energy too. That's the other thing, is because you're not just going out to go out and get trash. You're actually like, if you go somewhere or go to a bar or a restaurant or a concert, you're going and designating that time for enjoyment, because a lot of us going out before was, we wanted to watch a game or go see a concert or whatever, but it was always really going for the booze. I mean, I look back and think, we used to go to some shady ass bars, and it's
seedy ass shit.
Well, and the reason is because you can go there and you can get drunk and you can sneak your little cigarettes or do whatever, and nobody gives a shit.
Cares.
You know what I mean? And I feel like there's some psychology there that thinks like this is the energy I want to match, right? Like when you're stinky drunk, you don't want to be out with people who are like presentable.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I need to go somewhere and hide where I can be sloppy and no one will notice. Where the ground smells like pee. That's where I'm looking for. The
ground smells like pee.
It's true.
They do have a distinct funk odor in those damn places now.
I know.
If you ever walk into them, you're like, oh, God.
I know. I want to go into one while I'm sober just to like use the bathroom to be like, how did I exist here? Problem is, we'd probably walk in and they'd be like, hey, but no.
I gotta go. Good seeing you guys. I gotta go.
Have you, so like Ryan's biggest thing was he would frequent like one or two places, and it was normally just like a restaurant. And it got to the point where when he would walk in, they would instantly know what he would want to drink, right? And they would like set a beer down. And I'll ask, like, I don't know if that was your experience too, but have you been anywhere, Ryan, where you've walked in after like a while and someone has sat a beer down and you've been like, hey, I actually don't drink anymore?
I think, but yes, that actually did happen at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Really?
It did, yeah. And there was a guy there. His name's
It doesn't
matter. But I had not been in that place in almost a year.
And you remembered it.
And I went up there to get a to-go order, and you had to go to the bar. So I sat down at the bar with Lily to pick up wings, and he went to go pour a Miller Lite and said, you tall Miller Lite, right? And I said, oh, God, no. You have any athletics? He's like, are you sure? I said, yeah, man. I quit drinking. He says, well, I noticed you lost a lot of weight, man. He said, you look great, and then we kind of got into the conversation about it. And he was telling me how they're up in their NA game at Buffalo Wild Wings, which they have, which I think is awesome. They got a big variety now. But yeah, that's the only time that's happened. But other than that, when I first became sober, I avoided all the places that I went to regularly.
Of course, yeah.
For almost a year. That was like the first place I'd been to, and it had been almost a year before I'd gone into those places.
What was the biggest reaction that you had, Jessica, just from like, family, friends, co-workers, whoever, who kind of first noticed? Because even if like you were associated with Miller Lite forever, Ryan, and I don't know if yours was the same, but even if it's not a huge association, people take notice, and not in a bad way. Just what was kind of the reaction from people who were really close with you? Were they like, oh my gosh, thank God? Or was it a little bit different?
I think by the time I finally quit, because I had slowed down quite a bit, even though I knew deep down I had a problematic relationship with alcohol, I think sometimes other people were kind of like, did you? Because I wasn't, because I seemed like I had my shit together mostly. But I also know that people knew that I liked wine And my sister, I remember she bought a bottle of wine, for me, and and she's doing it to be sweet, because she didn't realize that I had quit, and I remember once I went to my grandfather's house, and he at the time lived in Idaho, and I remember him saying, I mean, he and I liked the same exact type of wine. And I just remember him telling me, you know what, Jessica, you're a drinker and I like it. And so, it's like I can kind of see now where I got a lot of it from. But I think it skipped a generation because my mom, she does not drink at all. And my dad does not drink much. So I think that they are very proud of me and my decision. And I think other people, they see the positive impact that it's had on my life. So overall, I think it's been a good thing. But some people maybe are just a little surprised.
Yeah.
They know I liked wine, or they knew I was down for a good time, and
Yeah.
I still am, of course. But
Right.
You're still
Just
the
in a
same
different
person.
way.
That's
Yeah.
sometimes even like sneakier, right? Like at least when you wear it outside. But when he quit drinking, it was very much like people who were close to him thought, okay, thank goodness, like we all knew. But we've had a lot of people on the podcast, and I hear a lot of people who say the same thing. They're like, my family, my friends, if you talk to them, they may say, well, they never really had like a big problem with it. But again, that goes back to show how good we are at masking, how good we are at noticing, like, okay, well, as long as something looks and presents this way, then it's not a problem. And that's where alcohol, and we talk about this with gambling too, right, gets really problematic. And I won't deep dive into this, but there's a whole like, what am I trying to say? Like societal thing too, where it's okay to be drunk on wine at an upscale bar, but it's not okay to be drunk on PBR at a seedy bar. When really, there's no fucking difference. You know what I mean? There's no
One's
difference.
cheaper than the other.
Yeah, like what's the difference between going to we used to go to Asheville and do wine tastings, we're doing a wine tasting, and get hammered and think that it was like, we're so bougie because we're sitting here drinking wine and eating cheese and olives. And I'm like, it's no different than being bellied up to like a bar, drinking cheap beer and eating chicken nuggets. You know what I mean? But this whole like veil that it's under too, like if you had drank the exact same amount and had the exact same life, but you were like hammering beers or going to seedy bars, maybe people would have perceived it differently. I don't know. So that creates a big shell for people to live under and mask under with alcohol too. Because again, if you're working a good job and you're paying your bills and you're doing all the things, then what's the problem? And that can be harder for people to get sober even because it's not, you have to recognize it. Like that's huge that you recognize that within yourself. It always leads to that. But it can be harder to connect to that part of yourself when you're wearing it so well that nobody even notices.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You had.
Oh, so I was just going to say, it's so interesting when people don't think that you have a problem. But when I was 18 and I went to college, I remember one of the first times that I drank. It wasn't the first, but there's some party and there's jungle juice or something, probably at Everclear, I had no idea what my tolerance was, even if I did, so I'm just whatever, drinking a lot of jungle juice. I'm passed out in a lawn in front of some party, and this is the very early days of Facebook. So I think the next day I was tagged in a picture and I was like, I don't see myself. And I was in the corner passed out while there's like a group of people taking a picture. And I use that as an example of that was one of my earlier experiences of drinking. And it was like that for a lot of my, the rest of college and my early 20s. And I've been to AA before. I didn't like it because I felt like it was very dogmatic. I felt like there was this kind of condescension, and I grew up in a very strict household, so I kind of rejected a lot of that. And I remember at one point telling myself, like, Jessica, like, if you don't get it together, you're going to have to be like one of those weirdos who can't drink anymore. And my standard for being able to continue drinking in my early 20s was don't black out and don't throw up. And so that shows that even if I got better over time, which I did, it was still like there was always a problem from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't see that part. And they saw, and maybe they didn't even know me for as long as, maybe they didn't know me for that long, but I've had such a transformation along that way too. Just in terms of how much I've grown and changed. And I was a complete mess, a complete disaster that did not have it together in any way back then.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show we set the bar for ourselves so low too.
Yeah.
Like, okay, as long as I don't pass out on a front lawn or puke, then I'm good, right? Because that's what you tell yourself. And this is not exclusive to alcohol. This is any sort of bad habit or negative mental health space. I mean, I have binge eating disorder, right? So I'm like, don't ask, don't tell. Like, if nobody sees it or if it's just one night, like, it's fine. No, that's just giving yourself permission to do something. And then, Ryan, do you know what jungle juice is?
No.
You don't? Woo! I do. So I drank a lot in college too. And jungle juice pretty much, Ryan, is where you get just a ton of different liquor.
Oh, and you just pour it into a cooler?
And you make it taste like Kool-Aid. No, but we didn't pour it into a cooler. It was like a keg.
Oh, yeah. Ours was just in a cooler with ice in it. I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
You just pour whatever, just a big concoction of shit.
Yeah. I mean, and to be passed out drunk on a front lawn in college with puke in your hair was funny. Nobody thought anything about that. I used to see like frat boys do the most vile things, like drinking things and puke and rally, and like, oh my gosh. At the time though, everybody's like, ha 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 ha. Like we're living in Varsity Blues or something. But you look back and you think, God, we literally we're trying to kill ourselves. Like we could have really hurt ourselves. And then you're right. You're like, you get older and you're like, okay, so it's not cute to pass out anymore. So as long as I don't pass out or puke, then I'm fine. But the base layer is still there. Like that's just giving you permission. That's a really good way to put that. And that's another theme I've seen for people. Like my brother, I've talked about him a lot on the podcast. He was in active addiction for 20 years. And there was a few years in there where he held a steady job, had his own apartment, had a car, had all the things, was paying his bills. But he convinced himself like, oh, I'm sober. I just drink wine every once in a while. I take the occasional pharmaceutical and I snort a little Coke. Like, I'm good. I still get up and go to work. You know what I mean? And you did the same, not the drug part, but you did the same thing as far as like, well, I quit drinking for 2-3 months and now I'm just going to have the occasional glass of wine. I feel like wine is like what we convince ourselves. Wine is like the permission. Well, I'm not sitting here chugging beers. I'm just sipping some wine.
Sipping wine.
And so you convinced yourself you were like sober. You're like, I don't have a problem. And it's so easy to exist in that space, right?
Yeah, it's bad.
When it always leads back to the same place. So to go back to the beginning, that meeting that, slapped you in the face, so to speak, was that the very last like big scary moment, or was that kind of just one of them towards the end? Not everybody has a rock bottom, and I like that we're creating that narrative. But you said you started with just cutting back. Were you already cutting back before that, or was that the moment that you were like, I need to slow it down?
You're saying when the meeting happened?
Yeah, like whenever you were hungover and you're like, oh shit.
Oh yeah. I mean that was the last day that I had a drink.
Okay.
And I remember that later that day, even after the meeting, I told my coworkers I'd go to a happy hour, and then I told my friends I'd hang out with them, and before I flew back the next day, and I felt like absolute shit, of course. And by the time I got to see my friends that evening, I thought I was going to have a mental breakdown because in my mind, it wasn't, oh, wow, I did really well in that meeting despite being hungover. It was just like, I had such a hard time processing it, and I didn't have time to process it. And I also just that sort of feeling of anxiety and depression and shame, that mix of things that you have to deal with when you're just massively hungover, it distorts everything. And I think, when I got back to Texas, I probably felt depressed for 3 or 4 days, honestly. And that was one reason why I had tried to cut back long before, because I noticed that even if I didn't think I drank that much, but if I drank a couple days in a row, or if I did get drunk, like it would be a while where I felt kind of depressed, and it really affected my mental health. And I've dealt with mental health issues for all of my adult life too. I mean, they go hand in hand. I mean,
Sure.
it wasn't
yeah.
just one reason for me drinking, but mental health was a big part of it too, because I self-medicated before I realized what was wrong. And so anyway, I'm starting to answer a different question that you didn't
No,
answer.
I love this. I love this. I love this because you're right. You're like, you quit drinking and then you're like, huh, my mental health is a little bit better. Well, yeah. I love that. And I think that we are starting to recognize everything under this umbrella of mental health, like, the drinking or using, however you want to define it, is a symptom of the problem, right? And so I can imagine, not to speak for you, but that when you got into the meditation world, that's where you really started diving into like how to connect with yourself and what caused you to drink or have that relationship. Some people it's therapy or it's journaling, or it could be religion or faith, it could be anything. Cause like journaling has been a huge thing for you in meetings. And I would imagine meditation's the same for you, whatever it is that is helping you connect with the, why do I feel the need to self-medicate? What's going on within me? Because removing the alcohol, I know a lot of people who will quit drinking or quit using, but they're not working a program. And so I hate this term, but it's like dry drunk where, okay, so you're not using, but like you're still not getting to the root of the problem. So you really still aren't existing in this sober mental space. Like if you're just now doing other things to mask.
Yeah. I realized when I cut out alcohol how much I had used substances my entire adult life to self-medicate or have fun or whatever, fit in, whatever you want to call it. And when that got taken away, it's like, holy shit. Like, first I would, I feel like I can be kind of naive at times. And so I thought, oh, I took alcohol away, the problem's fixed at the very beginning. And then, of course you realize, well, why did I choose to do that in the first place? And then some days I would get smacked in the face with reality. And I'm like, oh, I have to do this without any sort of lubricant, and it sucks.
Right.
But, and I think part of me, wanted to be the cool girl or fun or whatever else. And that was wrapped up in my identity too. I didn't think that I could be sober and cool. I didn't think that coexisted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. But I had to build all of those tools in addition to meditation. I love journaling too. I do EFT tapping. I try to spend time in nature, and exercise is really important. I mean, all of those things kind of going back to the basics with sleep and nutrition and water and building authentic connections with people and therapy. I mean, I feel like I do all of those things, mirror affirmations, and but they work.
They do. There's a reason that every single recovery or anything, and it sounds so cliche and so stereotypical, but like they do. And we talk a lot about just showing up. And I'm like, listen, but like, even if you're not ready to like quit drinking or quit doing whatever, because I know that's a huge pill for some people to swallow, like, just start by getting 8 hours of sleep and go outside for 10 minutes. Like, that's it. Like, even if it's just like standing outside like a weirdo, you know, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even that alone legitimately works.
It's just about getting started.
I am like I mean, I am terrible if I don't get enough sleep. I'm
Yeah.
like, fuck the world. I'm angry at everything. Blah, like monster, you know? And you don't realize that because when you're drinking or when you're existing in that space, even if you sleep, and I'm using air quotes here for people who can't see, like, sleep for 8 hours. No, you're not. You're not really getting necessary sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing I learned from the tasks too, about how long alcohol will disrupt your sleep, even if it's not the night that you were drinking.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
100%. So in the corporate world that we both are, connections are huge, right? That's how you can move up the ladders, the connections you make and things like that, or get another job, connections you've made. How has the connections in sobriety, how has that really helped your journey to where you've gotten at today?
I would say the more that I show up authentically, the more that I find my people. And that can be, of course, the reframe community and sober spaces are so impactful because you have a bunch of people that have a commonality and they're willing to be vulnerable. But I've found that, even in a corporate setting, I can still, I'm not vulnerable in that same way, obviously, but I can still say something about not drinking. There are people I've said something to about not drinking, and then they'll say, "Oh yeah, I just hit my 2 year," and they'll talk about, I am working on my MBA, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and I lost 20 pounds, and so it's interesting. I feel like when you are honest with people and tell them where you are on your journey, what they say. And sometimes they are drinking, but they are curious about it. And they want to hear more about how it's helped you or what your experience has been like. And so I think that, I can't always, or I shouldn't say can't always, but I'm not always like that with everyone. But when I feel like I can be, it's like this surprisingly amazing connection. And it only helps to have that mental clarity in the corporate space, especially when with my job being so demanding, there's just no way I could do it with that dampening.
I feel the same way. It's interesting that, when you, and I hold back too, because I just, I sober out loud, obviously, social media, podcast, stuff like that. But it's funny how many people now come up to me because, all our platforms are so open, and people I don't even know in my space that just come up and shake my hand and say, "Hey man, I saw your podcast, or I saw a post you made, and I just want to let you know." I mean, this literally just happened the other day at another store I was at. It's not even one of mine. It's one my son works at. Some guy just walks up to me and says, "Hey man, I just hit 700 days last month."
Wow.
And I'm like, holy shit, I don't even know that. But, it's so cool. Or I've had people reach out and say, my mother's was an alcoholic, and she attended AA. She's 20 years clean or something. I'm like, holy shit. But it really is a kind of a cool icebreaker in that sense, especially when you're getting to know people, or you're in a space where you are at happy hour or something like that, and somebody notices that and they come up and talk to you. That's pretty interesting when stuff like that happens, for sure. It's definitely gets it off your chest, right? You're like, okay, it's out. It's okay.
I love that too. I've had a lot of situations like that. And even like, I don't work I work in real estate, but I don't work in corporate world. But I really love those connections as well. I went into a fast food restaurant and was ordering something, and I had on like athleisure, excuse me. And the woman was like, I need to go to the gym that you go to. And the funny thing, I don't go to a gym, but I didn't say that. And she was like, how do you stay fit? And I'm not even fit. Like, I don't, whatever. And I just said, I quit drinking. And there was someone else who worked there, and they walked all the way up from the back, and they were like, that's amazing. I just hit 100 days off of methadone, and I don't touch alcohol or drugs, and I've never felt better. And she gave me a fist bump, and it was like a whole moment. And I was like, that's fucking amazing. Good for you, And just knowing that she heard somebody even just say quit drinking, and it prompted her to go up, and just that moment, right? In those moments, we're besties. No matter who you are, we're cheering you on. And I love that because it shows that no matter who you are and where you are, we're encouraging and lifting up, no matter where you are, what you do, what you believe, politics or anything. In those moments, we are friends and allies. And she was like, that's fucking awesome. Yeah. And then I had another situation. I was talking to somebody, and this was more of a professional setting. So someone who I never in a million years would think would divulge something personal. Mm-hmm. And they said, I this is not something I normally tell people in this facet, but I've been sober for, I think she said 5 years or something like that. I'm celebrating this year. And I said, that's incredible. And they were like, yeah, I hear you talk a lot about your husband and your podcast. And, so when you talk about these things so many times, I'm sitting there going, yep, I get it. Yep, I get it. Been there, been there, been there. And she eventually opened up to me and started crying about just things that she promises her mom now and everything. And again, just existing in that moment where people are like, oh my gosh, you feel like you give them more, you're giving each other something, a gift to be able to exist in that space. I don't want to say I'm giving, because you're really giving each other something. And hopefully it pushes them. You're absolutely right. If you're all out at a happy hour and you're the one that's ordering sparkling water, and somebody else is like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous. I thought I was going to be the only one who wasn't drinking, or we went to a very nice restaurant and you ordered a non-alcoholic beer and they brought it in a glass, and you were like, I just, just bring out the can from now on so I make sure there's no confusion. And, the manager of the restaurant came out and shook your hand and was like, I've been sober 25 years or something like that. I personally poured your drink and brought it over and want to shake your hand. Those moments, I agree, are they're the best. They are the best because you don't even know this person, but it's a genuine connection that you share with somebody. And that is so rare to do, especially with complete strangers these days. It feels so wonderful.
Yeah.
I love those.
Feel like we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I really
100% agree.
And we as humans are going through so much shit. Life is just a fucking roller coaster, and there's so many demons or battles or whatever. And so, I try to be more transparent with it because that's authentic. I feel like most people can spot when someone's being a phony, where you act things are perfect and you don't have problems. That's bullshit. We all do. Right. And so when you have people that clearly had an issue with something and faced it head on, and now have, we have now all been alcohol free for some time, and that's a lot of work. And so to be able to celebrate that with each other and have that genuine connection is amazing. And so that's where I am willing to put myself out there more. I am someone, I think, that just takes risks more in general because I would get knocked down all the time, where people are just like, Jessica, just give up. What is your problem? but it also pays off too, where it's just you have these amazing moments with people that you wouldn't have had otherwise. There are lots of times I thought I had fun nights with people drinking, but, I also, a lot of the time in the back of my head would think, these people don't have my back. These aren't the people, are these good people that are going to, you know, and most of the time it was just someone to have fun with in that moment.
And the funny thing is, when you do have those nights where you go out and you drink a lot with somebody, they don't remember it or you don't remember it. So it's like it never happened anyway. So it's like, what was the fucking point of this shit?
Right.
I mean, did we really have fun? Did we really go dancing last night? What the fuck happened here? Did I just dream about this?
I will say that the only part of drinking that I miss, and it's not even the drinking, is the drunk girl bathroom camaraderie that you find. Like, that is the best. Like, if you ever feel like shit about yourself, or you don't feel pretty, or you're feeling like garbage, like, just walk into any bar at like 1 or 2 in the morning and just walk into the girls' bathroom and be like, I'm so fat. And you will have a swarm of women just telling you how beautiful you are and how fuck that guy.
Fuck
and
that guy.
You're a princess. But you know, that's in sobriety, you have those moments all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I always think that I always call it like the drunk girl bathroom theory. Like, if we all just treated each other like drunk girls in a bathroom at 1 a.m, the world would be a better place. You're a motherfucking princess. Fuck that guy. He doesn't know what he's missing. Whatever it is. Right. That's what I'm saying.
It's our connection.
And in the along the lines of transparency, we're going to get to our question that we always end with. Okay. So you already told us the story on your own about blackout drunk in the front yard on Jungle Juice. So you can't use that
Which
one.
is good.
That was a good one. The whole time you're telling it, I was thinking, man, we should have saved that one. But, you know, like it or leave it, alcohol is a huge part of our lives, and it wasn't always terrible. Like I always say, some of my most wonderful memories and favorite moments were when we were drinking, whether I like that or not. So tell us a story, a drunken Jessica story that you think back on, and maybe it was a hot mess, but god damn, it was fucking hilarious when you think back on it. And it's got to be a juicy one. And it can't be Jungle Juice because you gave us that one for free.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully this is a good one. The conference, actually the same conference I mentioned earlier, there was a happy hour and 2 women came up to me, and one of them, they both lived in Southern California, and that's where I was born. And so one of them lived in Torrance, which is the city I was born in. And I lived in Scottsdale at the time. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to, go visit, and I'll go visit my grandmother, and I'll just make a whole thing out of it. And I didn't know her well at all. I had literally just met her in Washington, D.C. And they were partiers. I mean, they were just big partiers, and I was down for all of it. I mean, I just remember like we met at a Japanese restaurant, and then we went to Sharky's in Huntington Beach. And I feel like that's like the place, like, if you're like in that area, is like everyone goes to Sharky's. And that was actually not my first time there. And so, it was just kind of like, hopping around, like doing whatever they were, I was just kind of down for all of it. And, so I hung out with them like all night, basically. A bunch of people I didn't know. I didn't even live there. I'll say like I even came back around New Year's Eve. They had it was in Beverly Hills, like some kind of like New Year's Eve, like hotel party type thing. And there was some guy that was like kind of knew some people in the group. And I just like danced with him all night and like made out with him all night, and then I just like ditched him at the end. Like, I just love like dancing and like but just kind of like, just sort of like, yeah, like if there's like dancing or making out, but then like just bolting at the end. I was done for it, I guess.
I love that. Now that's the college girl coming out, because there's a lot of dancing and making out and ditching at the end. And then you run into them at like the grocery store.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're like, how do I know you?
That's right. Or just avoid altogether.
I I love it.
I love like nerdy guys. So I ended up actually, because he was connected to that group, I ended up like playing chess with him during the pandemic, like virtually, like, so I actually kind of still like talk to him every once in a while.
Like, have you ever had a time whenever we made out all night long in a bar?
That's right.
Yeah, me neither. You know?
I think we got ramen afterward. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
That's right.
I love that.
Oh, man.
Hey, you're still friends.
There you go. It's even better.
She's like, oh, your face. She's like, yeah. Okay. I love that.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Awesome.
It's awesome. We really appreciate it.
And if anybody has a video or a picture of you passed out in the front lawn post Jungle Juice,
Facebook.
Please send it to me. I want to see it. I want the proof. You said there was a picture. It is somewhere floating around out there. I need it.
I think I tried to untag myself 19 years ago or something.
If anybody's listening and they have that picture, please send it to us on Instagram. We will not share it. I just want it for my own eyes. I won't send it to anybody. I promise. Jessica, this has been great. Right.
Yeah.
All right, Jessica. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I'll definitely talk to you soon.
Okay. Sounds good. Take care.
See you, Jessica. All right. Bye-bye. If you love the podcast, which I know you do, please like, subscribe,
and hit that notification bell to
Boom.
get notified every time we post.
That's right. Dropping them, baby. Word.